Hey there, fellow gaming fan and my Muñaños gamer. This is Jesus from Jesus Gaming, and I want to welcome you all to the very first episode of Continue News and Gaming, which happens to be my second attempt in the podcast world. And if we are counting my rebrand and reboots, if you will, this is like my third or fourth time, if I remember correctly, starting with Jesus el Podcast, which was actually a Spanish attempt that I did in the podcasting. And then I switched it on with Jesus Gaming and Podcast when I decided to go fully English. If you are watching this via YouTube, you already know that we do also gaming news, retro gaming, gaming info in general, and also live walkthroughs, simulcasting via YouTube Short, and Twitch channel, all with at JesusGG. Regarding of continue news and gaming podcast. Well, this is mainly for condensing all the important news from the gaming world, and I'm trying to tackle my poor life balancing and almost tight scheduling and not affecting my offline life, and also want to keep going on content creation. So I believe that this was the best alternative that I have to actually keep things rolling. And also I want to keep curating gaming news content, which podcast was the only way to go with all that aspects in mind. For the time being, we are publishing every Fridays at noon Eastern Time, GMT -4. If we are on daylight saving time, then it will be 1 p.m. at Eastern Time and still noon at GMT -4. And in the case of the audio version of this podcast, if you're listening through via Spotify and all available or major podcast platform, thank you for the consideration and the opportunity. For those who doesn't know me, this is Jesus from Jesus Gaming. I've been a content creator since 15 years ago. More than a half of my career has been behind blogs. I also began doing video content since 3.5 years ago. Of course, with the pandemic giving so much extra time, I think that it was kind of a time to upgrade from written content to actually made audiovisual video content. And nowadays, I decided to have the best of both worlds. Currently, I got my own concept of blogging or gaming news blogging at jesusgg.syc. Please consider to check out my website, Gaming News Blog. And I have both YouTube and Twitch channel at JesusGG. Sorry about that. My major social media presence include Blue Sky, Mastodon, X, Facebook, and I also keep updating the community tabs for the YouTube channel. So there's that. And again, if you're new to this channel, feel more than welcome, and your support is really appreciated by just visiting my website. If you would like to consider checking out more content, please hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell for everything gaming news, retro gaming, live walkthroughs, and continue news and gaming talk. Without further ado, let's go right into it. The first thing that I wanted to give a little discussion is about one of the main legends within the gaming industry, or more likely a gaming developers community. And you said the name of Hideo Kojima, you practically and hastily you associate with one of the OGs, former Konami talent, and a guy that has been in the industry since the mid 80s, and obviously known for Metal Gear Solid series. And talking about being with so much time in the industry, you will think that what kind of a mindset is currently Hideo Kojima right now? We are talking about almost heading for 40 years, 4 decades in the industry, and less than half of them in his own gaming studio, which he founded after being left out of Konami because of some allegations that Konami was having kind of a civil war, or and power play that unfortunately Hideo Kojima was on one side and was in the losing side. I think this is a whole topic for another day itself, but I do want to have the few first minutes of this episode to consider some of the updates that Hideo Kojima provided himself. And most likely, I think the most shocking is that we kind of have the legacy already set for Hideo Kojima even after he passed away. Talking about what to expect on Death Stranding 2 launch in the issue 411 of Edge, Hideo Kojima revealed that he's still thinking about creating games, concept ideas that he still hasn't given like the green light or haven't taken like a serious pre-production or pre-development level. So there's that, and he revealed that during the COVID-19 pandemic, he fell seriously ill and underwent an eye operation. And I think that he didn't want to say that he was careless about his health, but he admitted that he kind of forced himself to confront his own mortality, and he assumed that he will be able to create it for as long as he live. But heading to his 60 years, I think the priorities of Hideo Kojima has changed and more balance on self-care and health rather than being a workaholic within his own studio, Kojima Productions. So that is why there is an unconventional way to keep his legacy and ideas flowing whenever he left his mortal self. And most of these trusted people within Kojima Production had a 64 gigabyte USB drive filled with ideas for Kojima Production to carry on after he's dead. And all this in the interview, Kojima revealed that his existential reflection led him to prepare for the future for his studio. Um, Basically, he didn't want Kojima Production to simply manage existing intellectual properties or be forever forced to keep maintenance to existing games. And for as they recorded this, they only launched Death Stranding as their original game, and by next month, Death Stranding 2 on the beach will launch. And I think that Kojima kind of have like a virtual will or kind of like a will, and he just wanted to Kojima Production to keep going, creating games. Here are the ideas, and while he didn't go into high details, he shared that there are game concepts. Um, Most of them are for pushing boundaries in gaming at all. So don't expect Hideo Kojima to letting their team dial down with the immersive as we know him that he developed games. And also there's a narrative structures in with features intricate plots with these philosophical themes. And he said that his note may include outlines for future story that explore topics like memory, identity, and human connection. Kind of those topics we've seen on Death Stranding. I think that he want to transpire to other ideas. Of course, there isn't a Kojima game without technological innovations. So the plans are based on the team always embracing cutting edge technology. And it can go from motion capture to AI driven storytelling, which I know that this kind of may rise red flag for those association that hires and protects actors. I believe that this is going to be a red flag, no doubt. And also films and multimedia projects. And yeah, it's not strange of this topic of films and multimedia projects. Hideo Kojima is a fan of movies itself, and many of the releases since Metal Gear Solid, heck, even in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, there was reference always from movies. Uh, the original Solid Snake design on Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was based on Mel Gibson. Of course, with the changes of time and the launch of Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, the game was reimagined to be more kind of a attached to how Solid Snake looks since Metal Gear Solid from 1998. So it shouldn't be a surprise to look or having to see Hideo Kojima wanting to think about film and multimedia projects. Kojima Production is actually cooperating with production of the original Death Stranding movie, so it's not rare to hear that that USB drive or the wheel of 60 gigabyte of size have actually film and multimedia projects idea. But that's not all in the opportunity that I'm having here talking about Hideo Kojima's latest updates. And we know again that we are expecting Death Stranding 2 on the beach as a second main game. But we know that there are two games that are currently in development. One of them is Odie and Physint, and I want to go with Physint first. Physint was announced back in 2023 as a game that it was developing using both PlayStation Studios and Sony Pictures assets. And again, films and multimedia projects. And I think that Physint will be kind of a next level of games crossing movies or movies crossing game that maybe Kojima started with Metal Gear Solid 4 Sons of the Patriot. But this game is not only about that, it's also the return of Hideo Kojima in the tactical espionage action, which his last time of that genre was officially on Metal Gear Solid 3 and Solid 4. I was going to say Peace Walker, but Peace Walker and Portable Ops was changed from tactical espionage action to the thing about commanding and everything like kind of a strategy that became Peace Walker and finally Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Details remain scarce. Kojima described Physint recently as a project that will elevate detailed entertainment to a new level, and he has emphasized that the game's story, theme, cast, acting, fashion, and sound will be all designed with a cinematic approach, blurring the lines between film and interactive storytelling. As I said early, I'm just reading my notes here. But the thing is that the game is still way behind of a schedule that you will consider that this game will launch for this generation, the PlayStation 5. We know that this game, obviously using PlayStation Studios and Sony Pictures asset, will mean that this game, at best, time limited exclusive, but might go beyond a year or 2 years. And talking in perspective on how behind is the development, some people are starting to assume that we are behind like 5 to 6 years. So that would mean that there's a high chance that Physint might be a launch title for the proposed PlayStation 6 and maybe a cross title that will have both PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 6 version of Physint. Now, what about OD? OD was actually announced first by Hideo Kojima as a new original game and his first attempt in the horror genre. If we are counting officially, that is because unofficially he tries to reboot the Silent Hill series with the game Silent Hills that unfortunately it would never came to life. And in this opportunity, this game is going for Xbox Game Studio as Kojima Production will be developing the game, but Xbox Game Studio will have the role of being the publisher. It's interesting that this opportunity at the publication of this interview via Edge doesn't include anything about OD, which the game was announced in November 2022. And recently, Kojima confirmed that Jordan Peele has been hired to be a co-writing with Hideo Kojima after I believe he was watching a movie. And no, it wasn't not watching a movie. It's actually talking with Jordan Peele, and I believe that neither was kind of a giving the idea or the concept that Jordan Peele might wanted to participate, but Hideo Kojima felt so intrigued on the interest of Jordan Peele that he actually asked him to serve as a co-writer for the script or the game. Unfortunately, we don't have also any idea on what the game is about, but we got a high profile roster in the actors, which the game will star Sophia Lillis, Hunter Schafer, and Udo Kier. The last thing that Kojima referred of the game is that it will explore the concept of testing your fear threshold and what it means to OD on fear, which actually the OD might have like a significance of overdose. So there could be kind of a psychotic thing, or maybe the horrors within a psychotic for an overdose. We are still in the mystery. And I think that the last news that we got is that actually Kojima confirmed late last year that the game, and I believe that that is the reason that why we don't have a proper update, is that the game development was affected by the ongoing video game strike of the SAG-AFTRA that is covering the voice acting and video games actor actually. So it's interesting. It's interesting times that we are seeing Kojima production being active creatively. We got three games in development, one of them about to be launched, and two in the kitchen. Definitely, I needed to close today's debut episode of Continue News and Gaming with actually a game over with no press to continue. I'm talking about the Federal Trade Commission of the United States of America. After almost 3 years and a half of legal battle, the FTC has decided to drop its case against Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And basically, it was just a few days later that they officially lost their appeal of the July 2023 injunction preliminary hearing, which the judge sided with Microsoft about FTC not proving that Microsoft owning a conglomerate of gaming like it is Activision Blizzard King will be a bad thing for consumers, especially for the still young cloud gaming, computing, and marketing in general. Many believe that and for some perspective, this was an internal process. You can have the FTC having like a public lawsuit along with the DOG if the DOG decides to intervene on behalf of the FTC, or doing a co-action with the FTC. At this case, maybe the Department of Justice kind of knew of the possibilities of FTC winning or not, so they didn't try to intervene neither on behalf of Microsoft or the FTC. And this was basically a battle that the FTC faced alone against Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. So I will quote Brad Smith's reaction after the Federal Trade Commission published it that their internal processes was ordered to be dismissed. And it goes, today's decision is a victory for players across the country and for common sense in Washington, D.C. We are grateful to the FTC for today's announcement. That was then May 22. I think that this message is for the current administration of the FTC, because under previous administration and mainly Lena Khan, the FTC was kind of a intolerance for big mergers and company getting bigger for just getting bigger, and they thought that Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard King just to the sake for having Xbox and Microsoft Gaming becoming more bigger than it is. I think this kind of a mix of ignorance and misconception, because just because Activision Blizzard is now under Microsoft as a conglomerate is not technically under the umbrella of Xbox Gaming Studio, and I think that that was also a smart move from Microsoft to obviously have all the odds on their favor. I will try not to go neither too long don't read, but I don't want to go broadly about what was then and what brought us for today. But during the end of 2021, Activision Blizzard King was kind of on the fence with many legal procedures in the state level in California and in the federal level because of toxic working environment with a lot of allegations and things that eventually became true. I don't want to go into that because algorithms. And it was so dire the situation that reportedly Bobby Kotick decided to just sell the company to avoid more liabilities, which in part it was kind of admitted in the sense that he wasn't too lean to sell the company, but at the end, it was not only the liabilities and the lawsuits and the public relationship deterioration with the public itself. And my apologies for the redundancy. But also, Bobby Kotick found that Microsoft was kind of the help of the anchor that the company needed to avoid the fierce competition from China. And that has some plausibilities because at the time, Activision Blizzard was kind of in odds with Chinese publishers, including NetEase. We know that a mobile project for Warcraft was canceled, and most of the games that are currently being played, like Overwatch, World of Warcraft, and everything, was temporarily unavailable in China after the falling out. Apparently, there was a misunderstood between the parties, and Bobby Kotick apparently took offense with some attitude in the renewal of their agreement. There was that, and then by the beginnings of the 2022, Microsoft announced that it has come to an agreement with Activision Blizzard King to be acquired completely by them via cash and stock options that will facilitate the transaction. And obviously, we're talking about a global almost $69 billion. And from then, it was kind of expected that regulators were probably was not gonna happy, especially with the history of Microsoft and regulations, especially antitrust. Microsoft trying to be the leader because it's their way or the highway, and yeah, it was understandable that there could be kind of a resistance, but the resistance in this particular case was kind of unnecessary. Actually, some regulators around the globe agreed that Activision Blizzard being purchased by Microsoft shouldn't be taken as a menace to the whole industry itself. And indirectly, this whole process didn't stood well in the public relationship side for Sony and PlayStation. I believe that James Ryan dismissal after more than 2 decades at Sony and his last stretch of his Sony career behind the Sony Interactive Entertainment, the parent company of PlayStation, basically damaging his reputation and his legacy by trying to be the cheerleader of PlayStation being in a dire situation because of the purchase and how Microsoft could leverage in on their favor because how big the company it is, how rich the gaming catalog it is, counting obviously the 2020s, the 2010s, the 2000s, and the 90s catalog of games. So there was a rich history. There was kind of a rationale, but PlayStation kind of used the wrong words. And one of the lowest point in the campaign of PlayStation against the purchase of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft was Jim Ryan trying to lobby in Washington D.C., and that was the most backfire thing in all gaming history, at least for 2022 and 2023, when those or not those, some of the congressmen that actually talked with Jim Ryan published a joint letter accusing PlayStation of actually being on the wrong side of history and also reminded them that PlayStation is the big cause that why Xbox is not a success in the Japanese market, home turf of PlayStation, no less. And then we go a little fast forward with all governments around the world, most of them not finding any problems that Microsoft and Activision Blizzard joined forces permanently, and we got the preliminary injunction during the pre and summer of 2023. I think that the biggest point that it was revealed is that Microsoft via Phil Spencer, and Phil Spencer's deposition was kind of the highlights, or for me, it's one of the biggest highlights of all the preliminary and the process. Back in 2021, when Microsoft bought Cinemax Studio, the parent company of Bethesda, the main reason was that they were sick and tired of hearing that PlayStation was keep nailing exclusive, and they heard that during the development of Starfield, Bethesda was in conversation with PlayStation about making Starfield a PlayStation exclusive, and that was it for Phil Spencer and the executives at Microsoft Gaming. And they went on making a offer to Bethesda, and apparently it was kind of like a first offer, and Cinemax just accepted without any problems. The other thing that I found interesting during the deposition is that Microsoft purposely led what we know now as Game Pass Cloud, Project X Cloud, to be with its tech stack inferior to what is called Google Stadia. Actually, a former engineer for Google Stadia was asked to make a deposition about the current state of the cloud gaming, why Stadia isn't a thing anymore, and basically it's all the story that we know about. I can actually I will note it as a future episode on the before and after of Google Stadia. But bringing in Google Stadia was to Phil Spencer make the point that Microsoft purposely did not upgrade the tech stack behind the Game Pass Cloud to be more on par with cloud gaming, which, in my personal opinion, current cloud gaming service are way behind the stack of Google Stadia. And I find it really criminal that Google is just letting all the tech behind Stadia being in a storage mounting dust without being used, and you could call their competition, they're still way behind in technology, and Microsoft included. But Microsoft via Phil Spencer confirmed that they decided on not upgrading from servers that were kind of the equivalent of Xbox Series X, connected to a computer edge or a node edge for servicing via the internet, because they knew that Microsoft will be in this situation like it was with the FTC, and the cloud gaming aspect will be the main issue. And actually, time really gave them the reason, because basically that was the both the FTC and the United Kingdom CMA, which is the equivalent of FTC in the United States. The main concern was the cloud gaming is a market that it wasn't developed well. Google was thought to be a big major player, and unfortunately, it was not the time. I hope that Google really learned from their mistakes and try it again someday. And Microsoft having like a big thing to say in the cloud gaming was kind of the main concern. The process went on, and the FTC definitely didn't make the case. And CMA, being like the puppet at the UK, wasn't a good strategy neither for the CMA itself and for the FTC. The FTC was being called out on this attitude of having like a micromanagement of the CMA on how can they do things. And in the UK, actually, they sided with Microsoft that the CMA went on a bad faith movement, and at the time, the UK was in need to have the private community or private companies to really invest in the UK. And this kind of a process was a horrible message for the campaign that says invest in UK or make your company a United Kingdom. We are friendly with you, establishing your company, creating jobs, and selling your product. For the FTC, it wasn't about that. It was about having just the sake of company not getting bigger at the expenses of consumer choices. And that's something that the FTC went on and on and on. even after losing the injunction and losing the appeal, I think that the FTC wanted to just keep going. Might sound a little contradictory saying this now, but I think that the current Trump administration couldn't care less. For them, all these processes was just a waste of taxpayers' dollars, and if they knew that the chances were slim, they shouldn't make it all this campaign that they made and basically saving taxpayer money. What I'm surprised of all this is that practically it took like 4 months after Trump's administration took over. My perception was that, oh, they're gonna go just directly and cut the internal process, and I was surprised. I think by March, I was telling some friends that, hey, the FTC internal process hasn't finished yet. Then I was reminded that there was an appeal happening. And with the appeal happening, probably that's the rationale on having the internal process. What's funny is that a few months ago, I read that actually one of the own judges within the FTC's internal processes was trying to actually save the agency from itself because it was there was kind of a changes that probably it was speculated that the judge was just trying to save face value and maybe trying to make the landing or the failure landing kind of a soft because this was kind of a failure that the FTC brought to themselves, and there was kind of a hope. My theory on why this took so long is that maybe the previous administration of the FTC or Linus Kent's FTC made it some internal process that it will be very difficult and onerous to have the process canceled without awaiting for the appeal, which basically backfired this very week with the appealing decision that it was not granted for the FTC. I want to close with one theory that I got on why Microsoft hasn't circulated much game besides Call of Duty and the retro games announced this week. Some people disagree with me, but I'm gonna uphold my theory that Microsoft didn't want to give them like the slightest or microbiotic chance for the FTC to have some validity and have this process going forward at best, or maybe winning the favor of getting the appeal for the injunction. And at this point, since the companies already merged, what will happen is that Microsoft will need to divest Activision Blizzard King and sell all the applicable assets, which of course that will not happen now with the end of this process. So, my fellow gamers muñaños, this was the very first episode for Continue News and Gaming. Please, if you're watching this via YouTube podcast, leave down the comment. What are your thoughts about all this news that I shared today, especially with the end of the saga between the FTC, Microsoft, and Activision Blizzard? Please consider to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell for everything gaming news, retro gaming, live walkthroughs along with Twitch. You can follow me there and also consider a subscription. Remember that Twitch Prime allows you to freely support any of the content creators that are in the gaming community at Twitch. Please consider to granted me that opportunity. I will be working with some perks for paid subscription. And also, if you're listening via Spotify and major podcast publications, thank you very much for your support. Until next week, this is Jesus from Jesus Gaming and closing out this episode of Continue News and Gaming, Health and Success, and Happy Gaming. GG's.